Hello, everybody out there. Once again, we have Mark Collinsworth of Vere Global Financial with us. And tonight we're going to be talking about the good news that's coming to we, the consumers of the United States, in terms of inflation. In February, it will be going down. But Mark is about to explain why that isn't good news at all, why it's a lot of hooey. Mark, explain.
Well, thank you, Larry. So the CPI numbers that came out this past Friday showed that inflation's running at 6.9%.
Right.
Well, shortly after that announcement, they said that they're actually going to make some adjustments to how the CPI numbers are calculated with the January data. And they're going to use numbers from what's called the PCE number, which is the personal consumption expenditures number, which also, by the way, is the official number. The PCE is actually the number the Federal Reserve uses to measure inflation, because the Federal Reserve knows that the CPI has a bunch of baloney in it and is not an accurate description of inflation. So what is the PCE, personal consumer expenditures? So let's say, comparing CPI to PCE, let's say the CPI number for soda uses Coca-Cola, the price of Cokes, as its measure for inflation. Well, let's say you may not buy Coke. You may go out and you buy Sam's Cola, or you may go out and buy Dr. Pepper. You might buy something totally different, a soda, just not Coca-Cola. What the PCE measures is where are people actually spending their money because Coca-Cola has gotten too expensive. So in the PCE, it might be common if people are spending money on Sam's Coca-Cola or Big K Cola, that will turn up in the PCE because it's cheaper, and those cheaper numbers are actually going to start going into the CPI number.
So therefore, since people are buying cheaper versions of what they used to buy, that it gives the illusion that inflation is decreasing when it's really not. It's just people are being forced to buy cheaper stuff.
And a lot of times buying lower quality items. And I can hear it now. When the numbers come out in February, you'll hear the president say, look at what a great job we're doing. Inflation's falling. Our policies are working.
Yeah. And I guess people who know that they're being forced to buy cheaper stuff and perhaps not as good quality know that's a lot of baloney, even though they're touting this as a big triumph. Now, another thing they've been manipulating for some time, Mark, is the jobless numbers, correct?
Correct. Jobless claims numbers, as well as the unemployment numbers. You kind of give example, there's going to be like fairly big spikes and declines in unemployment due to seasonal hiring. Perfect example right now, there's a lot of extra hiring going on for the holiday season. Right. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, they like to make adjustments to that so you don't get a lot of whipsaw numbers. Well, that's a good thing because they're trying to flatten out the spikes you get from all this additional Christmas shopping. Yeah. Where the fault is when they make the adjustments to show an increase, just not a big increase from the additional holiday shopping. When those people are starting to get let off their jobs after the holidays, January and February, the BLS tends not to make as big an adjustment for those. So in essence, the adjustments the BLS makes are always positive adjustments to the unemployment number, not negative adjustments.
Also, no, Mark, for quite some time, they've been juggling it to the effect. Additionally, they've been juggling it by saying that if you've stopped looking for work after so long, you're no longer considered unemployed.
That is correct. So when the BLS does its survey every month to see who's employed and who's unemployed, when they ask you the questions, if they ask you are you actively looking for a job, and you say no, I'm discouraged, or I've tried, I'm kind of taking a break right now, you will not be included in the unemployment number.
Right. So that brings it down right there. Now, yes. I know that used to be a big factor before when people were really looking for work, and just not being able to find jobs or anything that would be worth their while. It'd be cheaper to stay home. But now, even though the jobs are paying more, people are staying home for different reasons. But again, that's bringing down the unemployment rate, correct?
That is correct. And the unemployment rate that you actually see released every month, the official number, that's actually what's called the U3. That's the one that excludes if you're discouraged or whatever. And also, if you work 1 hour a week, you're actually classified as being fully employed.
Really? I mean, they made no distinction between part-time and full-time employment in the stats that they put out?
Well, they do, and that's actually in an unemployment report they used to actually publish in the 1990s called the U6 unemployment report, and that actually changed under Bill Clinton. They thought the U3, the questions on the U3 gave a much accurate description of the employment situation. That description actually made the unemployment numbers drop dramatically because, like you said, the discouraged workers are not included. So right now, under the U3 number, unemployment's running, I think, at around 4% right now, and they classify that as maximum unemployment. But they still do the U6 because those people are discouraged workers and so forth. They still publish a U6 report. You just don't hear a lot of it in the news because if they were to discuss the U6, which is what I consider the true unemployment rate in the economy, right now it's actually over 11%.
So the U6 is just not mentioned by mainstream media. So people are given the impression that it's a much lower unemployment rate than it actually is.
Correct.
Mark, where do you see this going now? We interviewed you a few weeks ago and you correctly predicted that the COVID-19 variant now, the Omicron, wasn't going to have a lasting effect on depressing the stock market. And that's proved to be true, just as you said it would. But overall now, with all these other factors coming in and things persisting that are hits on the economy, where do you see it going now in the next 6 months or so?
I think I think for the stock market, you'll still see a rally taking the market up. What my concerns are right now is that the Fed's going to start raising interest rates. They're going to start pulling back on their QE program. And don't forget, with the higher prices going up, that's still affecting the economy. So consumers are still spending less and less. And a lot of people, they save up their money to give one big splurge at Christmas time. So you'll probably see a big splurge into shopping and stuff, even though it will be a little bit muted because of supply chain issues and inflation. But once we get past Christmas, normally we always see in the first quarter of the year, we see a normal slowdown in the economy because people aren't buying stuff because they did all their buying in the holiday season. Well, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a slowdown come the first quarter. At the same time, the Federal Reserve is talking about raising interest rates because they feel like they're behind in the inflation rate right now. And that will probably be a little bit of a shocker for the stock market when they see the economy slowing, inflation going up, and the Federal Reserve wanting to raise interest rates to quell that inflation.
So how badly will that affect the stock market?
I think we're kind of overdue for a good correction. I think you could probably easily see sometime next year a 10, 12% sell-off in the stock market. And those are very normal. Usually big recessions only come around, once, maybe twice a decade.
Now, so we'll see a correction, but after that, the stock market will be doing well?
Yes, I think after you get this next correction, because the Federal Reserve has kind of backed itself into a corner. They know how important the stock market is to people's spending. There's some people that day trade that their income really comes from trading stocks. And so they don't want the stock market to take a big hit. So I think after they start slowing things down on their end, you'll see them kind of slowly revving it back up again. And that should be the buying opportunity. But at some point, the Federal Reserve has kind of kicked the can down the road after Federal Reserve Chairman after Federal Reserve Chairman. And I kind of see that you kick the can long enough, eventually the can kicks back. I kind of give you an example. If you go back to like the 1980s, the remedy during the 80s and the 90s was basically you run into an economic problem, you cut interest rates. Well, then we cut interest rates to zero with the dot-com bubble. That stopped working in 2008. So then we cut interest rates to zero. Then we start buying subprime bonds to help the economy because of the housing bubble. Then that stopped working. So then we cut interest rates again to zero. We bought the subprime bonds. Then we started buying U.S. mortgages to try to help the economy. Then we started buying subprime debt, mortgages, and 10-year treasury bonds from the U.S. government to lower interest rates. And now here we are roughly 10 years later, and we're doing all those things and doing even more. So every time we run into a financial crisis, there's an additional add-on. The question is here, when do the add-ons stop having an effect and it's just bottoms out?
Well, I mean, the current situation is that after a prolonged period of keeping interest rates low, the Fed is now pretty much announcing they're going to be raising interest rates. And in simple terms, why is that? Now, after keeping them so low for so long, now they're going to be going up because why?
Well, the Fed feels like they've gotten kind of behind the inflation curve. That's reason one. Reason two is the Federal Reserve knows that there's recessions out there. Eventually, you're going to have a recession in sometime in the future. So by raising interest rates now and reducing some of that QE, that kind of reloads the guns for the next recession.
So in other words, they're raising interest rates to slow down inflation, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Which is the way it usually works. Now, this is pretty much contrary to the financial picture that the Biden administration has been pushing, isn't it?
Correct. And this kind of goes back also with the inflation picture. The inflation that we have, yes, it's rising prices, but I don't know if you necessarily call it inflation at this point. And the reason why, if the two main issues that's causing the inflation rate to go up is supply chain issues and oil prices. Those are two problems that are very easy to fix. Like, when I was in the Army, I was actually a logistics officer dealing with supply chain issues for the military. It would be a very easy situation if, even if for me at my low level in the Army, I could fix supply chain issues in 90 to 100 days. But nobody seems to be wanting to do that. The oil problem, all you got to do is start pumping oil like crazy. Stop pumping it in Saudi Arabia, paying a huge transportation cost to get it from Saudi Arabia to here with the tankers. Pump it here in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, Texas. Pump that money. It creates jobs here. You don't have the huge transportation cost you have to pay to ship it across the ocean. It has multiple benefits from it, and we have a lot of oil. It would really, really impact CPI just by pumping oil here in the United States.
Yeah. But also, it's talking about, they're saying now that they're bringing prices under control. The price of gasoline has dropped by a few cents, and they're touting that to high heaven, although it's still much higher than it was a year ago. But people are paying quite a bit higher prices for basics, like gasoline. You go to the store, all the food prices are higher now. So people are feeling it despite what the administration is saying. So that in itself is going to have a bad effect on confidence in the economy, is it not? And won't that repercussions?
Correct. And a good thing that you mentioned now on the gasoline prices, rising gasoline prices, that's already technically the equivalent of the Federal Reserve raising interest rates already 75 bips to 100 bips already, or a 1% increase in interest rates just from the rise in gas prices being the equivalent to what the Federal Reserve would do with interest rates. But yes, it does have a psychological impact, as well as you have less money to spend on discretionary items.
And people will be perhaps pulling back again on spending because they're getting afraid, right? Because they won't have enough money for the basics.
Correct. And I think that's why you're going to see a slowdown here in the early spring of next year.
Yeah. Now, they brought prices of gasoline down by a few cents by releasing the strategic oil reserve. What was it? How many millions of barrels?
Oh, my gosh. Don't even get me started on that one, Larry. I think it was something they released, 20 million barrels of oil or something?
I think it was 50 million.
50 million. And the reason why I'm saying 20 million is that, they released 50 million, but did you know that the United States consumes 20 million barrels of oil per day?
Yeah. But doesn't that helps a little bit? Isn't that why prices went down by a few cents?
It did, because the people that trade the oil futures, they got scared thinking, are they going to release 100 million barrels, 200 million barrels? What impact is that going to have? So that panicked traders a little bit. But now traders are starting to buy oil back up again. Why? Because consumers are still going to have to buy that oil, and they're going to have to restock the strategic petroleum. So now you're going to have an additional buyer of oil, which would be the strategic oil reserves. They'll be buying oil also. So it wouldn't surprise me here in the next month or two if you see oil prices actually go higher than where they were pre.
All right. So that was only a temporary effect to reduce it by a few cents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has no lasting effect.
Yeah. Uh, what I find interesting too is the administration is having more and more difficulty keeping everybody in line in terms of what they're pushing out to the public. Like Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve chair, contradicted Biden by saying inflation is not temporary, as Biden keeps saying, correct?
Correct. Well, Jeremy's kind of in a permanent job for his term versus Biden, who's got to play more politics. But I do believe Jeremy is correct to a certain degree that inflation is transitory. The problem is, and I think Jeremy is seeing this himself as well, is the government is causing the transitory inflation to not appear because, again, it's the government's fault. That the Fed has nothing to do with it. The reason why inflation is going up is not the Federal Reserve's fault. The two big components of the inflation increase is oil's not being pumped in the United States and the supply chain issues. On the supply chain, people ask me, because I do have that background in logistics, what would you do, Mark, to fix the supply chain problem? Well, the first thing I would do is under the executive order of the president, because he signed the Defense Act, well, Trump activated the Defense Act to mobilize more hospitals and stuff for the COVID outbreak. So the Defense Act has already been activated. Since it's already been activated, all Biden has to do is sign an executive order and order all those cargo ships that are sitting off the coast of California and order them to go to the ports of Miami and the ports of Houston to unload their goods. The ports of Houston and Miami right now are fairly empty. They're seeing their normal activity, but they could take the overload with no problem. But Biden won't do that.
Why won't he do that?
I think part of the issue is because I have a feeling the California governor probably has gone to Joe Biden and asked him not to. And the reason why is because California actually gets a port fee. So when those cargo ships unload, they actually get to put a port fee or a tax on those unloading ships. And those fees with all those ships can end up being millions and millions of dollars. And if they send those ships around to Houston or Florida, that could be the potential of them losing anywhere between $70 to $100 million in port fees off that unloading, not to mention the workers there at the ports that aren't going to have jobs.
Yeah. But, with all this instability and all this fear now among the public and where the economy is going, a lot of people I know are wondering whether they should move to gold. Is that good advice?
I don't think so. And this might get into some conspiracy theories and stuff, because the Federal Reserve knows that gold is a very dangerous item to the fiat currency. And this is one of the reasons why I'm also not big on Bitcoin, is because gold and Bitcoin is a threat to the Federal Reserve. Just like in the 1930s, people were buying up gold. Federal Reserve realized that all this money they were putting in the economy wasn't going anyplace. It was going into gold. They made it illegal to own gold and hence confiscated. Now, they paid you for it. That's how we got all the gold in Fort Knox. But the Federal Reserve viewed gold as a threat to the currency. It always kind of amazes me that anytime we have a financial crisis or something, gold starts going up, and then all of a sudden it just hits a roadblock and just stops going up for some reason. 2008 is a perfect example. I thought gold would have gone through the roof. Gold didn't go anyplace in 2008. You would expect with Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns going bankrupt. And one of the conspiracy theories out there on that is because the Federal Reserve knows that gold is kind of that panic button. If it starts taking off like a rocket, people are hitting the panic button. And where the theory comes in at, did the Federal Reserve intervene in the gold market in 2008 because they didn't want another red switch to click on the economy saying, hey, it's time to hit the panic button and run? Because gold hit a roadblock in 2008 and just stopped going up for some reason. And I can't explain why that happened.
So therefore, the airwaves are filled now with offers to buy gold, urging people, because it's such a stable thing throughout history. It's been like a reserve currency in and of itself. So you're saying that that's largely empty rhetoric.
I think as long as I think someone's manipulating gold, because it just kind of surprised me. The thing about this is also kind of another thing that's kind of perplexed me here, is that looking at gold, with the inflation rate, the CPI numbers came out on Friday showing 6.9%.
Yeah.
If inflation is really there, why isn't gold? Gold's actually down. Gold actually hit its high of the year in August of last year and has dropped 10% since August of last year. But inflation keeps going up. So is someone manipulating the gold market, or does the gold market sit here and says, hey, inflation is not really a problem?
Yeah. So you don't expect the price of staples, food, gas, and all that to drop anytime soon in any significant way?
I don't think those items are going to drop for the simple reason when you deal with food prices, because farmers love higher food prices, you don't really see a lot of reducing food prices. Food prices take a much longer time to come down. They do things like oil and so forth.
Yeah. And, moving into the winter now, especially in the northeastern states, people are worried about being able to pay for their fuel as they heat their homes. No relief in sight there, correct?
Correct. No relief there, because the government just simply will. The government's got, we'll call it woke green or green woke. They tout this climate stuff, and that's incorrect. Perfect example. I'm sure you saw on the news about all the tornadoes that hit up there in Kentucky over this past weekend. And Joe Biden is already talking about how that right there is a perfect sign that we need to wage war on climate, because there's climate issues with tornadoes like this. And I saw someone posted a very, very interesting stat of the number of tornadoes that have actually hit the United States going back over the last 50 years. And my friend also made this comment, says technology to detect tornadoes today is a lot greater than what it was 50 years ago. So tornadoes may have happened 50 years ago, but we may not have the weather technology to even detect they actually occurred out in, wherever.
Right.
And that chart that he sent actually showed that we have fewer tornadoes now than what we did in the 1980s, the 1970s, and the 1960s.
But don't they seem to be of more strength along with hurricanes?
I will have to agree. I think tornadoes may have picked up more strength, but the people that will counter that say, well, you also are dealing with more populated regions. So if a tornado came through and hit a city that had 5 acres on it, okay, well, 5 acres worth of cities got destroyed. But a tornado now comes through a city that's built on 30 or 40 acres. Well, now that's 30 or 40 acres destroyed. Did the tornado get stronger, or did the population of that region where the tornado hit just get bigger?
Well, the one that hit Kentucky, it was a half-mile wide. And what was it? I don't know how long it was, but I mean, it was a very long path and very wide, a half-mile wide. Now, I don't think we've seen anything of that strength in recent years, or a few of that power. So we have not, and of course that again, Biden and them like to point those kind of things out, but those are what in statistics, those are called fat tail events. You're going to have events just by the law of averages. You're going to have tornadoes that are going to be bigger than normal, and you're going to have tornadoes that are going to be smaller than normal, and hence that's how you come to the average. Switching a little bit now, again, one of my favorite inquiries is the effect of China on our economy. Now, if our economy takes a hit, people will have less money to spend because of higher prices. Who does that affect more, China or the U.S., since we import so much stuff from China?
China, actually, this is actually going to be a boom for China, because higher inflation is actually good, because the higher inflation prices, so the products that people are buying right now, a lot of those items happen to be American made. And American made products just tend to be more expensive, because when you actually buy a product that's American made, essentially what you're paying for, you might be paying the union dues in that price. You're paying Social Security taxes to the government in there. You're paying a hint of a bunch of add-on things that you don't see in that. China, on the other hand, doesn't have a lot of these add-on things. There's no such thing as unemployment insurance that an employer has to pay in China. So because they don't have all those add-on taxes like we do in the United States, they can charge a lot less for their products. Hence, once those cargo ships start unloading and more production out of China comes, it's going to be a boom, because people are going to see all these prices drop once the supply chains are opened back up again.
As I was going to say, even goods from China now are more expensive at Walmart, for instance. I mean,
they're more Correct.
American-made goods may be even more expensive, but most of the goods you buy at Walmart and other chain stores like that come from China.
Correct. And part of that comes back to the supply chain issues. A lot of those cheap Chinese goods are sitting in boats off the coast of California right now and can't get unloaded. So if you buy up what the existing Chinese goods that you have here, that's going to force those prices up. And then when you run out of those cheaper prices, well, now you're being forced to buy the products that are made in the United States. And now that's put an additional price hike.
All right. So you say once the ships start being unloaded again, the prices will drop, the foreign goods from China. But when is that going to happen? Anytime soon?
Well, it's interesting you should ask. I really thought because the problem is so easy to fix that we had already started seeing some relief already, 5, 6, 7 months ago. But they're not doing anything to actually fix the problem. Another thing, we mentioned a while ago about Biden could sign an executive order and force those ships into Florida and Texas to unload. He's not. Another thing he could actually do is the military. The military, I was in the military, logistics has a huge transportation force. You could basically activate the military's transportation force. And if you have problems getting goods from California to Kentucky or Ohio or to wherever, you could put them on military airplanes. You could put them on this. The military has a huge trucking outlet to transport soldiers on, to transport food. You could activate that and move all these goods and everything extremely fast from point A to point B. But they're not doing that. Another thing, if they're having congestion in California because the ports are so backlogged, look at World War II. The United States military built a huge port system in Normandy to unload goods and tanks that were coming from Great Britain into Normandy during World War II. In a matter of days, they had a large-scale working port system. Biden talks about infrastructure. Allocate a few $100 million out of that infrastructure bill, give it to the military engineers, let them build an additional port in California to unload all these goods.
But again, he's not going to do that. A lot of people say the reason why he won't make these moves is because they are trying to accelerate the transition to electric cars. Do you see it that way?
I have heard that too, and that's a really, really bad mistake because your energy cars just aren't efficient right now. They're expensive, and they just really don't work as well as people think they do.
Yeah, I think their thinking may be that, if you put more pressure on gas prices now, it's going to force people to think more about purchasing cars. And it'll also be an incentive to manufacturers to start pumping out those electric cars. Is that the scenario that they'd like to see play out?
Well, they're also kind of gaming the system. And this is one of the things that Elon Musk is very upset on. On the infrastructure bill, the Build Back Better bill, they actually have a provision in it where you get a tax credit if you buy an EV car. But that tax credit only applies if you buy it from an EV car company that is unionized.
Yeah, and Musk is not unionized.
And he has a really big problem with that.
Yeah.
Which I feel like they'll probably go to court because I'm sure you bring up things, the Constitution has what's called an equality clause in it. Is Elon Musk not being equally treated as a business venture with the United States associating tax credits to a certain group of people, but not assigning it to his group?
You said some time ago, Mark, that Elon Musk is not going to be the producer to dominate the electric car market because he will be outstripped by the big manufacturers in Detroit and elsewhere. So long term, his electric car investments for anybody is not a good investment.
I don't think so because it kind of goes kind of what you said. Companies like General Motors and Toyota, they do have EV cars, but you don't see them just pumping them out like crazy. They know that there's a small group of consumers that will buy those and wants to buy them because we'll call them the woke green people.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I'll never own an electric car just unless it really, really the technology really improves. But I one time my car broke down and it had to go to the shop and they gave me a Prius, which was an electric car. I hate it. It just did not have the pickup to it. It was an ugly car, no pickup. It just sucked.
Well, some of Musk's cars are faster than any other car, faster than Porsches, Lamborghinis, whatever, because it's, direct drive. I mean, his cars are expensive, but electric cars generally, and when it's a pure electric car, are much faster in acceleration than any gas-driven car.
Correct. And you're correct on that. If you want the Teslas that drive really, really fast, you're going to have to be willing to shell out an extra $30,000 or $40,000 to get that.
Right, right. But again, my question would be, what you've been maintaining for a while now is that when the breakthrough occurs and people really do start switching over to electric cars, it's not going to be Teslas.
But probably not. And the reason behind that is because one, China has several EV car companies. They can produce things a lot cheaper, and it seems like the United States likes to do more business with China. Plus, don't forget, let's say someone like General Motors. General Motors right now makes a whole lot more profit than Tesla does. It can take that profit and it can really roll out the car production facilities if it wants to. Not to mention, any kind of advancement that Elon Musk makes on a Tesla. I'm sure that the General Motors guys goes out and buys one of those new Teslas as soon as it hits the show, and they go back and take it apart to find out where they can improve upon it. So I believe when EV cars do hit the mainstream, which I do believe they will, I think General Motors and all these other companies are taking their money and they're investing it in a better version of the EV car to dominate Tesla when it comes time.
Yeah, one of the arguments in support of Tesla is that his technology is so superior that it can't be duplicated by the other car companies. Therefore, his cars will eventually dominate the markets.
I have heard that also, but also another thing, I don't know if we mentioned this, but a few months ago, Elon Musk actually filed some lawsuits against what's called J.D. Powers. J.D. Powers actually does consumer reports on cars. And guess what car company hit the absolute rock bottom dead last as the worst performing car with the most breakdowns on the market and worst consumer service? When you get that car repaired, guess what car ranked absolutely number one last on the list?
I guess Tesla.
It was Tesla. And Elon Musk is suing J.D. Powers to stop those surveys, because for them to get the surveys, they have to call owners of Tesla cars, just like they have to call owners of General Motors cars and Toyota cars. Tesla suing because they think that's a breach of privacy and they should not be harassing their clients to ask them about the car.
But you think the results of the survey are accurate about how unreliable and problem-ridden Teslas are?
Correct. Give you another point. About 2 years ago, AAA, auto service actually now puts if you own a Tesla, when you sign up for AAA, if you put Tesla on your AAA application, they will actually charge you a special fee because Tesla cars have such a high breakdown rate, and AAA is now tied up hauling Tesla cars back to the repair shop. They'll charge you a special fee for having a Tesla because of the extremely high breakdown rate.
But you think that electric cars are the wave of the future. Eventually, we're all going to be driving electric cars.
I do believe we will, just simply because I think at some point the technology gets so efficient you won't be able to tell the difference between electric power and gas power. I just don't think we're there yet. And more importantly, we're not there on a cost curve to make it affordable for the majority of the people.
And how soon do you think it'll get to the point where it's cost effective, it's affordable, and the quality is there, the reliability is there? The big breakthrough, how soon do you expect that to happen?
I don't expect that for another 10 or 15 years, but at the same time, I think somewhere in that 10 or 15 years, I think they'll actually pass a law. They actually here not too long ago, they tried to actually pass a law that actually would require all cars after a certain time, after like 2030, that those cars, no car can be manufactured in the United States that was not an EV car after 2030, but that bill fell apart.
Yeah, no, but also in the infrastructure bill, there's lots of money in there for thousands of electric refueling stations, electric stations.
Charging stations, which I think that is a complete waste of money in there. You know why? Because when you buy a Tesla Tesla comes with its own charging station. So when you go to your house, you can plug the charging station in and you can make it portable. So if you're in a Tesla and you're driving cross country and you stop at a Holiday Inn or something, you just pull your charging station out, you plug it into your room and it charges. So why are you building these charging stations when all the EV cars already have a portable charging station with them?
Well, how about if you're on the highway and you want to pull over? You're not staying at a hotel anywhere, but you need it charged up. So wouldn't the charging station come in handy then?
It would, but a lot of your charging companies have realized that same idea, and they're actually building a recharging additional fuel pack. So if you have to pull over at a McDonald's, you can pull one battery pack out, slide another one in, and you're good for another 3,000 miles.
So interchangeable batteries. Now, is Tesla going along with that concept?
Say again?
Is Tesla going along with that concept to switch batteries in their?
Well, Tesla's not actually making the batteries, but companies like there's a company called Blink and Volt, which are actually making the battery exchange components for them.
I mean, are Teslas designed to have a battery exchange?
Right now, the Teslas are not designed for that, but new cars coming on the market right now are being designed for that.
So you're saying that eventually there won't be any problem with having enough juice. You just battery exchange, or you can plug it in somewhere where you stop.
Great. And another thing also that they've just now here in the past year started working on, and this is like really, really ground level green car stuff. They're actually experimenting with cars that actually run on solar power.
Yeah, well, I mean, that seems even more remote to have that made practical.
It is, and I've seen some of the prototypes of the cars. We're talking about Prius being ugly. The solar power cars are really, really ugly. They only have 3 wheels on it. The cars are much, much smaller because, like you said, the solar power is not efficient enough. Can only seat 2 people. There's no back seat to it, and there's only 3 wheels on it for that solar panel to generate enough power to push a 3-wheel vehicle.
I can see going on the highway there at 70 miles an hour. I mean, that's not going to happen anytime soon. So anyway, Mark Collinsworth, once again, thanks for your insights on the economy, where we are now, where we're possibly heading in the future, and whether or not there is much good news there. I guess some of it, but a lot of it is an illusion, a delusion. It's hocus pocus at this point. Correct? Closing comment.
Correct. The CPI numbers, just like everything the government does, are just smoke and mirrors.
Okay. Mark Collinsworth of Vere Global, thanks once again for being with us.
Thank you.